At just 12 years old, Hope had lost everything. Her parents gone in a tragic accident. Her new home a prison of cruelty. But one song, one voice, would change her fate and save a life worth billions. Hope was only 12 when her world collapsed. Her parents, John and Elizabeth, were kind-hearted teachers who loved her more than life itself. One rainy evening as they returned from a school conference, a reckless drunk driver ran a red light at full speed. Their car was crushed. Hope, who was waiting at home, never saw them again. She clutched her mother's scarf for days, hoping they'd walk back through the door. Instead, she was handed a death certificate and a future filled with darkness. With no siblings or grandparents, she was placed in the care of her only living relative, Aunt Deborah, who didn't want her. That was the beginning of Hope's silent suffering, and the story of a miracle. From the moment Hope stepped into Aunt Deborah's house, it stopped feeling like home. Deborah, a struggling businesswoman, saw Hope as nothing but another mouth to feed. "You eat, you clean," she barked on the first night. Hope scrubbed floors, fetched water, washed clothes, and was never allowed to speak at the table. She wore torn clothes and ate cold leftovers, if anything. Her cousins mocked her. Her only escape? Humming softly while washing dishes. Aunt Deborah would scream, "Shut that noise." But Hope's songs were the only thing keeping her alive inside. Her voice, fragile, pure, and haunting, carried a pain that was too old for her years. She didn't know it yet, but that voice would one day change everything. Miles away, in a private hospital nestled in the wealthiest district of Lagos, lay a dying man, Mr. Alexander Stone. The billionaire tech mogul, once hailed as the Iron King of West Africa, had fallen mysteriously ill. Doctors couldn't diagnose the disease. Money couldn't heal him. Machines beeped, nurses whispered, but he remained unresponsive. His eyes stared at the ceiling, breathing shallow, hands cold. The media speculated. Some said it was karma, others said a curse. But Alexander wasn't thinking about business anymore. He was thinking about a song, a lullaby his mother once sang, a tune lost in time, until a 12-year-old girl unknowingly echoed it again. One dusty afternoon, Aunt Deborah sent Hope to buy tomatoes and palm oil. At the crowded market, Hope wandered toward a quiet corner and began to hum softly to herself. She thought no one was listening, but a woman was. Nurse Grace, a hospital staff member on break, froze when she heard the haunting sound. The girl's voice, soft as breeze, deep as sorrow, touched something in her. "Little girl," she said, approaching gently, "where did you learn to sing like that?" Hope stepped back, scared. "Nowhere. I just sing what I feel." Grace didn't press further. She handed Hope her contact card and said, "Come to the hospital tomorrow. Just visit. I think someone needs your song." That night, Hope hid the card under her thin mattress. She couldn't sleep. Why would a nurse want her to visit a hospital? Was it a trap? Aunt Deborah mustn't know. The next morning she woke early, did her chores quickly, and sneaked out. With fear in her chest and bare feet pounding pavement, she followed the address on the card. When she arrived at the hospital gate, the guards looked at her dusty dress and laughed. "What do you want, rat?" But Nurse Grace appeared just in time. "She's with me," she said. The guard stepped aside. Hope walked through the polished floors and into a world of glass, chrome, and silence, not knowing her life was about to change. Nurse Grace led Hope to room 707. The moment she stepped in, Hope gasped. Tubes, wires, machines, and a pale man who looked like he had no life left. That was Alexander Stone. "Just sing," Nurse Grace whispered. Hope trembled. Her voice cracked at first, then steadied as she sang the same tune she hummed at the market. The room changed. The machines stopped beeping so wildly. Alexander's fingers twitched, his eyelids fluttered. Doctors rushed in thinking something was wrong. But something was right. For the first time in weeks, Alexander's heart rate stabilized. Hope's voice calmed his pain. No one could explain it, but everyone felt it. Something divine had entered the room. 3 days later, Alexander opened his eyes. Weak, confused, but alive. The doctors called it impossible. It must be the medication finally working, they claimed. But Alexander wasn't confused. He whispered to Nurse Grace, "The girl, where is she?" She brought Hope in again. Alexander stared at her, not with pity, but with something like recognition. "Sing," he whispered. And she did. His pain melted, his breathing deepened. A tear rolled down his cheek. Hope's voice was no ordinary talent. It was a key to something locked inside him. And for the first time in years, the billionaire smiled. Behind closed doors, the hospital board met. "This child is not authorized," said one. "She's saving his life," said Grace. "Should we alert the press?" another asked. Alexander, now conscious but still weak, overruled them all. "She stays," he said. "She sings." Privately, he asked Nurse Grace for everything about Hope, who she was, where she came from. When he learned she was an orphan living with a toxic aunt, something in his heart cracked. He asked for no doctors that day, just Hope and her voice. As she sang, Alexander whispered to himself, "She reminds me of her." Alexander couldn't shake the feeling that Hope was more than just a voice. He asked for a photo of her parents. Hope had only one, a small, fading picture of her mother holding her as a baby. When Alexander saw it, his breath caught in his throat. "Elizabeth?" he whispered. That was his late college lover, the one who broke off their engagement when he chose wealth over love. Could it be? Could this fragile girl be his own daughter? He asked Hope her full name. "Hope Elizabeth Adeyemi," she replied. His hands trembled. "My God," he muttered. "She's mine." But before he could speak it, he needed proof. The past was knocking, and this time, he had to answer. Without telling Hope, Alexander ordered a discreet DNA test, a strand of her hair carefully collected, a blood sample from himself. Within 48 hours, the results came in. 99.9% match. Alexander Stone, billionaire, business tycoon, and once the coldest man in Lagos, had a daughter, and she'd been right under his nose, singing life back into him. Guilt hit him like a storm. He'd abandoned Elizabeth for power, never knowing she carried his child. And now Elizabeth has passed away. His daughter had suffered in silence. He asked himself, how do you become a father to a child you never knew, who saved your life without even knowing you were her father? Back in the slums, Aunt Deborah noticed Hope's absences. "Where have you been sneaking off to?" she barked. When Hope refused to talk, she beat her with a broom. That night, Hope ran away. Nurse Grace found her crying outside the hospital gates and took her in. Meanwhile, Aunt Deborah discovered Hope was frequenting a luxury hospital. Furious and suspicious, she stormed in the next morning, demanding answers. When told Hope had been helping the billionaire recover, Deborah's eyes lit up with greed. "She's my niece. I deserve compensation," she yelled. Alexander was watching from behind the glass, disgusted. He now saw clearly who had truly raised his child, and who had truly failed her. Alexander called Aunt Deborah into a private room. "You mistreated Hope for years. Now you want money?" he said coldly. Deborah shifted uncomfortably. "She's mine by law. I fed her." "You starved her, beat her," Alexander replied, voice shaking with controlled rage. "I've called child services. They'll be speaking with you shortly." Deborah exploded. "You can't take her. She's not yours." Alexander stood, eyes locked on hers. "She is. I have proof." He handed her the DNA report. Deborah's face drained of color. The game was over. Guards escorted her out as Hope watched quietly from the hallway, confused, but safe. Alexander had made the first real move. As her father. That evening, Alexander called Hope into his private room. She was nervous. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked. He shook his head. You did everything right. He pulled out the photo of her mother. Her name was Elizabeth. She and we were very close a long time ago. I didn't know she had you. Hope looked up, heart pounding. What are you saying? Tears filled Alexander's eyes. I'm your father, Hope. Silence filled the room. Hope blinked, unsure if it was a dream or a cruel trick. You're lying, she whispered. No, I wish I was. But I failed you. I want to change that. If you'll let me. Hope didn't answer. She just sang. And Alexander wept. Over the next few weeks, the bond between Hope and Alexander blossomed. They took long walks in the hospital garden. He told her stories of her mother, how smart she was, how she loved sunflowers, how she used to sing while baking. Hope clung to every memory like a treasure. Alexander began physical therapy. Doctors called it miraculous. He called it hope. She made him laugh, gave him purpose. And he gave her what she'd never had: safety. You've been my miracle, Hope, he said one morning. Now let me be yours. She nodded, leaning into his chest as he placed a soft kiss on her forehead. For the first time in both their lives, they were healing. Alexander decided it was time to tell the world. He called a press conference. Cameras flashed. Journalists buzzed. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, standing strong at the podium. This is Hope, my daughter. She saved my life. And now she's my legacy. The world was shocked. Headlines read, Billionaire reunites with long-lost daughter who healed him with her voice. Hope stood nervously beside him, holding his hand. Social media exploded. Songs were written about her. Interviews requested. But Alexander kept her close, shielding her from the frenzy. You're not a showpiece, he reminded her. You're a miracle. My miracle. Aunt Deborah, humiliated and angry, wasn't done. She contacted shady tabloids selling false stories. Hope's not really his. It's all a scam. One day she tried to file a custody claim, but the judge threw it out with scorn. You had your chance. You lost it. Deborah's business fell apart. Her neighbors turned on her. Eventually, she fled the city in disgrace. Justice had arrived, not with violence, but with truth. Hope, when told of it, simply said, I forgive her. Alexander looked at her, amazed. You are stronger than any adult I've ever met. Hope smiled. My mama taught me. Bitterness only makes our soul toxic. Months later, Alexander arranged a charity concert, not for profit but to raise funds for orphaned children across Africa. He asked Hope to be the opening voice. She was terrified. What if they don't like me? He held her shoulders. They will. You saved me. Let them feel that too. That night, the stadium was packed. Hope walked onto the stage, heart pounding. She closed her eyes and sang. Her voice floated like a prayer. People cried. Phones lit up the sky. She sang not for fame, but for every child who felt unseen. And in that moment, the world heard her heart. Inspired by her story, Alexander launched the Hope Foundation, focused on rescuing mistreated children and funding education for orphans. Hope became the face of the foundation. Her message was simple. No child should suffer alone. Donations poured in. Schools were built. Children received scholarships. Hope visited each center, singing, hugging, listening. She had gone from a broken girl in rags to a beacon of light for thousands. You've turned your pain into purpose, Alexander told her one day. She smiled. It was your love that helped me find my voice again. On the anniversary of her mother's death, Hope and Alexander visited her grave. Hope laid fresh sunflowers. Then she sang her mother's favorite song, a lullaby Elizabeth used to sing to her as a baby. Alexander knelt beside the grave, eyes wet. I failed you, Liz, but I'll protect her with everything I have. Hope placed her hand on his. She forgave you, I can feel it. The wind blew gently. Birds sang. It felt like Elizabeth was there, proud, peaceful, and smiling. Hope had finally come home, not to a house, but to love. Years later, Hope stood on a TED stage, now a poised 18-year-old woman. My name is Hope Stone. At 12, I had no voice, no power, just pain. But a song changed everything. Not just my father's health, but my destiny. The audience erupted in applause. She sang the same tune she sang in that hospital room years ago, and even now it healed hearts. Her story was no longer just a folktale. It was a living legacy, a reminder that from the ashes of sorrow, hope can rise and sing the world back to life. Hope is currently an undergraduate at one of the best universities in Nigeria studying medicine and surgery. Dear viewers, you just heard a story that carries a powerful lesson, one that could change someone's life, open a mind, or heal a heart. But if you walk away without liking, sharing, or subscribing, it's like silencing the voice of our ancestors who passed down these tales. Don't let their wisdom fade. Don't be the reason the next person never hears this message. Like, share, subscribe. Let the story live on. Thank you for watching.